They told him the weapon was unstable. They said it would tear the aircraft apart. They warned him that if it fired even once in combat, it could flip the plane, jam the controls, or kill the pilot before the enemy ever had the chance. So, the military banned it. The paperwork was signed. The orders were clear. The Underbelly gun was officially declared too dangerous to use in war. And yet, on a cloudless morning, over the Pacific, with Japanese Zero fighters pouring in like hornets, one American pilot made a decision that would rewrite air combat forever. He flipped the safety switch on a gun that was never supposed to exist. Minutes later, an entire Zero squadron was falling out of the sky. The problem, nitrogen monoxide, one could solve. By 1942, the Pacific Air War had become brutally one-sided. The Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 wasn't just a fighter. It was a predator, lightweight, impossibly agile, and deadly accurate. The Zero could outturn almost anything the Allies put into the air. American pilots learned quickly that trying to dogfight a Zero on its own terms was a death sentence. The US aircraft were faster in a dive. They were tougher. They could take more punishment. But they lacked one thing that mattered most in close combat: firepower. That could end a fight instantly. Standard wing-mounted machine guns required precision, timing, and sustained firing. Against a Zero that danced through the sky like a leaf in the wind, even skilled pilots struggled to land decisive hits. Japanese pilots exploited this weakness mercilessly, closing in, firing short bursts, then vanishing into tight turns that American fighters simply couldn't follow. Commanders needed an answer. Not incremental improvement, not better training, but something radical. And that's when the idea surfaced. The forbidden idea. The proposal didn't come from a general. It didn't come from a doctrine board. It came from a handful of frustrated engineers and test pilots who were tired of watching friends die in fair fights that were never truly fair. Instead of mounting guns in the wings, they proposed something different, something dangerous. A heavy caliber cannon, mounted beneath the fuselage, firing straight down the aircraft's centerline. An underbelly gun capable of delivering devastating firepower in a single pass. On paper, it was terrifying. The recoil alone threatened to destabilize the aircraft. Engineers warned that firing the weapon could snap mounts, jam controls, or cause catastrophic structural failure. There were fears. The gun could detonate ammunition beneath the pilot's feet, or throw the aircraft into an uncontrollable stall. Flight test data was inconsistent. Some tests showed promise. Others ended with shaken pilots and emergency landings. The conclusion from high command was swift and final. No combat use. No operational deployment. No exceptions. The underbelly gun was locked away. Another ambitious idea deemed too risky for wartime reality, or so they thought. The gun. The pilot who didn't agree. The pilot who would change everything was not reckless. He was experienced, measured, known for discipline rather than defiance. But he was also something else. Furious. He had watched Zero squadrons shred American formations. He had seen pilots limp home with shredded wings, or not come home at all. And he understood something the paperwork didn't capture. Air combat wasn't about theoretical safety. It was about survival. During training flights, he had tested the banned underbelly gun himself. Carefully. Quietly. He learned how the aircraft reacted. How to brace for recoil. How to fire in short, controlled bursts that minimized instability. He discovered something the reports had missed. If used correctly, the gun didn't destabilize the aircraft. It stabilized the fight. When intelligence warned of a major Zero sweep targeting American positions, he made his choice. He mounted the forbidden weapon, and he didn't ask permission. The Zero squadron came in fast and confident. They always did. From altitude, they spotted the lone American aircraft climbing below. An easy kill. Or so it seemed. The Japanese pilots split into attack elements, preparing to dive, turn, and dismantle the enemy with textbook precision. What they didn't see was the shadow beneath the fuselage. What they didn't know was that this American pilot wasn't planning to turn with them. As the first Zero dove in, the pilot pushed his nose slightly downward, aligning the aircraft in a shallow descent. The Zero slid directly beneath him, perfectly framed, not in the gun sight of wing-mounted weapons, but in the invisible line of fire beneath his feet. He squeezed the trigger. The underbelly gun roared. The sound was unlike anything heard in the air before, a brutal, concussive blast that tore through the sky. The Zero didn't spiral. It didn't burn slowly. It ceased to exist. Fragments fell away as the American aircraft thundered past, already repositioning for another pass. The Zero pilots hesitated just for a moment, and that moment killed. Then, the underbelly gun changed the geometry of combat. Zeros were designed to attack from below and behind, a tactic that had worked flawlessly against traditional fighters. But now, every approach angle became a death trap. The American pilot didn't need to outturn them. He didn't need prolonged firing solutions. One pass. One squeeze. One enemy gone. As the Zero squadron attempted to regroup, confusion spread. Pilots reported aircraft exploding without visible muzzle flashes. They broke formation, abandoning coordinated attacks, each trying to survive individually. That was their final mistake. The American pilot hunted them methodically, using altitude, speed, and the forbidden weapon that command had sworn would never work. One by one, Zeros fell, some shattered instantly, others trailing smoke before plunging into the ocean below. By the time the last surviving Zero disengaged and fled, the sky was silent. The aftermath. When the pilot landed, ground crews stared at the aircraft in disbelief. The underbelly gun was still intact. So was the plane. The kill claims were verified. Wreckage confirmed. Radio intercepts corroborated panic and losses. Commanders had a problem. They could punish the pilot for disobeying orders, or they could admit something far worse. They had been wrong. Within weeks, the ban was quietly lifted. Engineers refined, mounts, doctrine changed. New tactics were written, all centered around a weapon that had once been considered too dangerous to trust. The Zero's reign didn't end overnight, but it ended that day, the day command tried to erase it. Victory in war is celebrated loudly. Disobedience is not. When the mission reports reached command, they didn't arrive with applause. They arrived with silence, a silence thick with disbelief, suspicion, and fear. The numbers didn't make sense. An entire Japanese Zero squadron eliminated by a single aircraft, in a time window so short that radar operators initially believed it was a clerical error. Officers reread the after-action report again and again, stopping at the same line every time. Weapon used: experimental underbelly cannon, the same weapon they had banned, the same weapon they had declared unsafe, the same weapon that, on paper, should never have made it back to base. Instead of celebration, an investigation was launched. They grounded the aircraft. They isolated the pilot. They summoned engineers who had once argued against the gun and demanded explanations that no one was prepared to give. Because, if the report was true, and all evidence said it was, then the greatest threat to American pilots in the Pacific wasn't the Zero anymore. It was their own Doctrine. History remembers victories. High Command didn't fear the weapon because it worked. They feared it because it proved something dangerous. That years of planning, training, manuals, and combat assumptions had been built on limits that no longer applied. If one pilot could disobey orders and achieve what entire squadrons could not, then control itself was at risk. War required hierarchy, predictability, obedience. And yet, war also demanded results. Behind closed doors, generals argued late into the night. Some wanted the pilot court-martialed, not because he failed, but because he succeeded without permission. Others argued that Punishi, it remembers aces, it remembers machines, but it often forgets the moments when rules were broken, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. The underbelly gun was banned because it was dangerous. But war doesn't reward what is safe, it rewards what works. That pilot didn't fire the gun to prove a point, he fired it because survival demanded it. And somewhere over the Pacific, as Zero fighters fell, burning into the sea, the sky itself seemed to acknowledge a truth every soldier eventually learns. Sometimes, the weapon they tell you not to use is the only one that can end the war.